Well, I think I'm going to disappoint you, because in many ways it looks the same. Because what worked 30 years ago still works today. And that's because impairments caused by leprosy are mainly as a result of nerve damage. So the basics of self-care principles, taking care of skin, taking care to maintain the range of movements in joints and preventing contractures and preventing blindness, that all still applies as much in 2022 as it did 30 plus years ago. But I suppose the main difference that we have now is that we have technology that enables us to detect nerve damage much earlier. So, for example, in a number of our centres in India, we have physiotherapists who can conduct nerve conduction tests. So we're able to identify small changes in nerve function much, much earlier, and therefore we can start the necessary treatment that we need to put in place. Also, in the last 20 and 30 years, we've got a lot of advances in orthotics, and we've been able to take advantage of the improved orthotics and related facilities and interventions and tools from diabetes and from other diseases that cause peripheral neuropathy. We've been able to adopt those and adapt those for leprosy. So that's a change. And another difference that we've seen is with our advocacy work and with our training of general health workers and just generally raising awareness about leprosy-related disability, we've been able to integrate leprosy disability services into general disability services. So we don't always need to, we used to have to set up separate, for example, separate artificial limb workshops for people affected by leprosy. Now we're able to refer them to general limb making services. Another difference, it was starting 20 to 30 years ago, but another difference is the peer-to-peer support. So initiatives like self-care groups, where we have enough people to bring together to support one another. We can have self-care groups where people affected by leprosy and actually other neglected tropical diseases can support one another to take care of their eyes, hands and feet. And then some of those have grown into self-help groups, which goes into other non-physical rehabilitation things as well. And I think the other big thing that's happened really very recently, so I would say probably in the last 5 years in a major way, is that we've recognized that the effects of leprosy are not only physical, but they're also mental. So persons with disability, persons affected by leprosy who have mental health issues, who have anxiety, who have depression, we are more aware of that now. We have our staff and our partners have been trained to identify it, and we're training people to do some basic psychological first aid. Again, we're also training people affected by leprosy to be peer counsellors to support one another as well. Disability it's an emerging concept, and it's not just the physical and the biological stuff. It also has psychosocial side to it. And the WHO has something called the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health. And that talks about disability in three main areas. So we've got the body functions and the body structures, and that's what I would call, that's when I talk about impairments. So if a part of the body is damaged, so for example, in leprosy, we sometimes see that there are fingers missing or there are toes missing. That would be an impairment. Equally, a muscle that wasn't working well anymore, it was weak or it was paralyzed, that would be an impairment. But the second aspect of that is that the activities that I need to do day to day. So at the moment, I'm talking to you on a computer, and to use a computer, I need to use my eyes, I need to use my ears because this is a video call, and I also need to use my hands to manipulate the mouse and the keyboard. And any of the impairments I have of my eyes or my ears or my hands might affect the activity of using a computer or taking part in this video call. Another example of an activity might be driving, or it might be using a sewing machine, it might be writing, it might be tying my shoelaces. So that's another aspect of what we call disability. And then there's a third aspect, which is the participation. And actually, sometimes for people affected by leprosy, that can be the biggest thing, because you might be able to manage, it might not bother you that you don't have your little finger, for example, because it's been damaged by leprosy. It might not bother you that much that you can't use a computer mouse if that's not something you need to do. But if you're not allowed to go to church, or you're not allowed to go to the mosque or to the temple, whatever religion that you follow, or your children are not allowed to go to school because of the stigma that's put towards people with disabilities, and specifically people with leprosy-related disabilities, then that's a problem to you. And so that's a wider definition of disability. And for highly stigmatized diseases like leprosy, you might not need impairments. It might just be the diagnosis of leprosy, or even the suspicion that you have leprosy or that leprosy is in your family, that can give you the participation restriction. So disability has those three aspects: the impairments, the activity limitation, and the participation restriction. And all that is actually within a context, and that's another part of our understanding, is that, you know, I live in Leeds in England, and there are facilities here. I live in a house with a certain structure. There are roads that are well tarmacked. There are pavements that are smooth. There is a bus stop just outside my house. The shops have disability access. The schools can make reasonable accommodation. So there are environmental factors that mean that I can adapt somewhat. I'm not saying that my friends who are people with disability, that they don't have barriers they face here in England. But imagine if I was living, you know, on the foothills of Himalayas, and needed to get to the, you know, to a higher up place in the Himalayas. It would look very different if I struggled walking. You know, if I had an ulcer here in Leeds, and I had an ulcer, you know, if I was back in Nigeria again, or in Nepal, it would look very different. So there are environmental factors. And then on top of that, we've got personal factors. So I'm a woman. Women with disabilities have different challenges and barriers that they face to men with disabilities. Mothers with disabilities face different challenges than non-mothers. People who are educated, people who are not educated, people who can speak English, because a lot of the information and the resources are in English. And if you speak a language where the resources are not available, it's different. So actually, disability is not a simple concept. It's quite complicated, and it has layer upon layer upon it. And we're learning to understand that more. And I've talked about the WHO International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, or the ICF for short. But as well as that, we are understanding more and more within the leprosy world that disability is a human rights issue. And that has come a lot about from our work with the disability rights movement, mainly with the international treaty, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, or the CRPD. And we're realizing that there are rights that everybody has, but that sadly, people with disabilities, whether they're caused by leprosy or not, they have been systematically and institutionally, they've faced barriers to actually realize those rights, be they rights to education, be they rights to housing, be they rights to justice in the courts of law, be they rights to vote, and take part in politics, maybe as candidates, right to work, right to rehabilitation. There are a lot of articles in the convention. So disability is not just one thing, and it's not just about having an ulcer on my foot, or it's not just about having problems using my hands or seeing with my eyes. It's much bigger than that. And I think that has been the biggest learning for the leprosy world in the last 20 to 30 years. The majority of nerve damage is actually caused by something called leprosy reaction. And we, as in the Leprosy Mission, with our other partners around the world, we have got a greater understanding of what leprosy reaction is. And particularly, we've been involved in the 10 LEP studies, and they have really shown us how early nerve damage starts and what the risk factors are. So we're beginning to preempt and recognize risk factors much earlier, so we can actually prevent some of the damage happening, or we can actually treat it a lot earlier. But at the moment, some of the research that we're involved in, and as Leprosy Mission, we've talked about this a lot, still in relation to reaction, is where we're involved in the big Enlist study, which I know we've talked about a lot, but we're continuing to understand reaction, which will help us to actually prevent the disability. In terms of wounds, which is a very big part of the disability work that we do in the Leprosy Mission, I think we're looking at it from two main sides. One is the self-care side. So we have a big research project going on at the moment in partnership with the University of Birmingham and with the German Leprosy Relief Association, where we're looking at self-care and how to help make that more effective, and have, if you like, a model of self-care that can be, again, adapted and adopted across different programs and across different countries. But we're also looking at what the interventions that we can do. So there are surgical interventions. So one of our colleagues, Dr. Indra in Nepal, he's adapting a method that's been used in other diseases, and he's trying it out for leprosy and also Buruli ulcer, actually finding innovative surgical ways to treat leprosy ulcers and to keep them healed, because that's the challenge. It's fairly or relatively simple to heal a wound, but as soon as a person starts walking on the foot again, the foot can break open. So the challenge, and this is why Dr. Indra's study is so exciting, the challenge is to get that skin strong enough so that it can stand some of the pressure, normal pressures of just walking. With the appropriate footwear, it can stand those pressures. And the early signs from his studies are very, very promising. On the other side, some of, again, our physios in India and in Bangladesh and Nepal, they're looking at finding improved weight relief tools for healing ulcers. So really the only way we can heal an ulcer is with some of the surgical procedures by our surgeons, but also taking the pressure off the bottom of the foot. So, you know, if you broke your leg today, you'd have to use a pair of crutches to keep your foot up in the air, and so you wouldn't walk on it. It's the same principle for leprosy ulcers. We have to keep the foot in the air somehow, or at least stop the pressure on the bottom of the foot. So we have a new study that's just started looking at using more effective ways of getting the pressure off the bottom of the foot. And again, technology is helping us in some of these studies that we're doing. So we've got computer software and computer programs that helps us to analyze the pressure on different parts of the foot, and then help us to map out what the best kind of insole to put in the foot, or the best kind of device to put in the shoe, or to actually design the whole shoe itself. And then we can connect the computer and the software up to a 3D printer. We can actually print off those insoles, and they're absolutely made to measure. So at the moment, that's quite expensive, and we can't do it on a large scale, but we're studying it and then comparing it with our more traditional methods. And if we can prove the effectiveness, and if we can actually start to do that on a larger scale, the unit costs will come down. So it will actually be affordable. Now, whether that's affordable in the lower resource places where we don't have these centres with these computers, I don't know. But as for now, our research centres are looking at those, and that's going to be exciting as well. Our surgeons are always looking for better ways of treating disability, and we have Dr. Premal and others in India who are actually doing the tendon transfers, which again are from 50, 60 years ago. Some of the techniques are from then, and they still work now. But Premal and others are showing or are testing new ways or adapted ways of doing the tendon transfers, which makes the appearance and the function of the hand better post-operatively. It's not just the treatment, it's also helping people to have a better understanding of leprosy disability as a whole, or NTD disability as a whole as well, and not making it all about the impairments. I remember when I was still back in Nigeria, and I was involved in a research study that was specifically looking at the activity limitations that people affected by leprosy experience. And I was interviewing groups of men and women in Nigeria. And to assess the nerve damage on the hands, one of the things I do is test the sensation, and I used to use a ballpoint pen, test the sensation on the hand. But in this study, I was asking them, do you have problems counting money? Do you have problems putting your shirt on and off? The activity limitations. And there was one gentleman that I'd worked with for years. And he suddenly said to me, Jannine, at last you're asking me the things that matter. Because actually, I don't care if I have 2 points on my hand that I don't feel. I can take care of my hand. But what bothers me is I can't do the things I want. I can't read my newspaper. I can't turn the pages in my newspaper to read it. I can't fasten my shirt without asking somebody to help me. And that was a light bulb for me. I've been involved with this gentleman for ages, and I've been asking him the wrong questions. So I think as an organization, I think hopefully as the wider leprosy and NTD world, we're opening our eyes and ears and our hearts and minds to actually listen to the people affected and ask them properly, what matters to you? And how can we together get over these challenges and these difficulties and problems that you have? What would help you the most to reduce these barriers that you face in your daily life and in your community?